Alrighty, Heilige Chevra, Be'ezer Hashem, so incredible to be able to see you, to be able to learn with you and from you and together with you, to be able to explore the teachings of Rebbe Nachman, Breslauer Sichos HaRan. What a privilege. We have an amazing, amazing learning tonight, really powerful, very important. And Mirosh, we're asking the Master of the World for Siyata D'Shmaya, that we should be able to channel the Sichos of the Rebbe, of the Tzaddik, and of all the tzaddikim, whose words are kalul and nichlal in the words of Rebbe Nachman, Sichos HaRan, to be able to examine and explore this very, very interesting sugya of shikha and the importance of forgetfulness as a tool in our avodas Hashem. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope that everybody's doing well and that everyone had a very powerful and even beautiful Tisha B'Av, is such a thing, especially from the perspective of Chassidus. Okay, so let's jump into it. I know that I need this very badly, and so I hope that you'll join me in learning Rebbe Nachman's words together. So we're going to start first with Sichos HaRan Chaf Hey, which is not a great deal to talk about here. I'm sure there's an incredible amount of depth, but it's just seemingly a standalone concept that's going to feed into the idea of shikha that's spoken about in Chavav, but primarily we're going to be focused on Chaf Vav, which is lengthier, as well as very nuanced and a lot of different micro teachings all included within this one longer teaching. Okay, so let's first see Sichos HaRan Chaf Hey, and the Rebbe says the following. With regard to the machshavos, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep on interrupting to try to let people in. I have to be more discerning because the last couple of times there were chevra coming in who we didn't want, who weren't chevra. We didn't really want coming in. Okay, so I'm going to try to examine this a little bit more carefully. Okay, so Be'inin HaMachshava says the Heilige Tzaddik. Be'inin HaMachshava shabamayach, with regard to thoughts in the mind, who pela gadol. It's mamash a wonder. It's a total wonder. Ugdulas habayri is barach. Shemai. And more than a wonder, he says it really screams the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eich hamachshavos munachim b'mayach chavilas chavilas. The way in which the thoughts in our mind, particularly memories, but all thoughts which become memories, are all bundled together in many kinds of bundles. Chavilas harbe, many kinds of independent bundles and associative bundles of thoughts and memories, ma'oid elu al elu, and each of these bundles has a relationship with all of the other bundles in the sense that they're all ordered with regard to a person's life and what the person has experienced over the expanse of how many years and how frequently a person accesses certain memories vis-a-vis others, as we're going to see. When a person needs some bit of information, a person needs to recall a name or a place or a date or some kind of circumstantial, some kind of circumstantial or anecdotal or even primary point of memory or information, says the Rebbe, without any conscious effort of haphazardly or going through, a big pile of items to sort of get to something at the bottom, to look for something in a huge pile of things, effortlessly, all of the bundles and all of the structure of thoughts and memories reshifts, and Mamela, the mind is able to draw out that piece of information that a person has. And Rebbe Nachman says it's a pella. It's a total wonder. Because where exactly in existence was this thought until now? It was buried very, very, very deep in our subconscious, but it wasn't so distant to the point that when I needed to remember it, I wasn't easily able to simply go ahead and to bring it into my consciousness, which is a wonder. That means to say that people can go for years, 5, 10 years. I know I had this experience just recently. You can go for a long period of time without even thinking of something random, some little bit of information that you once knew that this person was related to that, something that you never, you heard one time and it became buried under all of these bundles and it's gone. And then pitom, without any effort, a person is able to go ahead and to retrieve this piece of information when needed. Where was it until now? Where was it hanging out? Where in existence was this? Not just in existence of the world, but within our inner world. How many parts of us are there that we're completely not even aware exist, but are not within us in the manner that they can be accessed with difficulty, but with ease they can be accessed. And I think that that's why Rebbe Nachman is speaking about this, in addition to pointing us to a very common human function that screams the greatness of God if a person has eyes open to that, which of course it is. But I think that Rebbe Nachman is sort of using this as a mashal, as a parable, or more than that, as an analogy for all of the other aspects of our inner world that are similarly accessible, similarly not accessed enough, but that can be easily accessed if we simply use this model and apply it to other character strengths, apply it to other aspects of our emotional capabilities and capacities, and so on and so forth. But here Rebbe Nachman is focusing on that analogy. We'll get back to that in a minute. Where was this thing until now? And this is true actually in accordance with modern psychology. It's interesting that the study, it's more psychological than neurological, the study of memory, believe it or not. But this is true, and they've done an incredible amount of empirical study with regard to how memory works. They didn't really scratch the surface, of course, but it does work in this way of associative memory, where conscious memories, as opposed to subconscious memories that sort of, or subconscious thoughts that are constantly working within every aspect of our engagement with life. A person's driving a car, there is so much that's going on, but it's going on in the subconscious, that subconsciously we check our mirrors and we check the rearview mirror and we make sure that our seatbelt is on and all of these different things. But ultimately, Rebbe Nachman says this amazing thing, that there are signs, there are different associative signs and links between the thoughts that exist within the consciousness as many different bundles, and they're all bundled together by virtue of their associations with one another. And when a person thinks about one thing, because you went to a place and there was a certain song playing, or there was a certain smell is very, very connected to memory. There's a certain smell, and it brings you back to a memory that of an experience of years and years, sometimes decades ago. When that happens, because you encountered something that triggered that association with that memory, like we said, we extract or retrieve this memory from all of these bundles of memories, out of all of these bundles of memories that are stacked and that are stored within the subconscious mind. When a person does this and retrieves this memory, you know what happens? Everything else is affected as well, because all of our thoughts are connected by way of association. And when a person retrieves one memory, that means much like a person goes into a supermarket and there's a whole pile of things. You pull out one thing, it's going to affect the entire pile. Hopefully it won't fall all over the place, but even if it'll shift, right? And that's what happens psychologically as well, because of the associations. When you manipulate one element of this system, it's like turning a little cog and the whole system moves. Everything shifts. Rebbe Nachman says it's very similar to what we find in a physical sense. When a person will retrieve one item out of a bundle of things, what will happen? Everything will turn over. So there are two interesting things in this. There are really three things that we can extract from this small teaching, and I want to go further into Chavav, into Sichos HaRan 26, which is going to be the bulk of tonight's session, all with the help of the Master of the World. What a privilege to be able to learn these teachings with you. But I want to focus on three elements here. The first element, which we mentioned in brief, is the idea that from the most mundane functionality of what it means to be a human being, if a person has the right eyes, a person can be able to see God's greatness from something that we don't even think about, primarily because it's a subconscious process. So certainly those things that we do think about and can think about. I was just walking to shul a couple of minutes ago. There was a woman walking in front of me whose feet were incredibly swollen, and she was walking with a limp, and I was wondering, what's going on with her? And I mean, her feet were literally, terrible, and it was an opportunity for me to look up at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I said verbally, thank you Hashem for my feet. Thank you Hashem that I can walk, And this is a conscious thing. This is something that's within our own eyes, that we can look down at our feet, at our hands, and look, at our eyes through the process of seeing, and to be able to thank Hashem for them. But Rebbe Nachman is saying even this, that it's a subconscious process we don't even think about, is perhaps more incredible than those things that we do often think about, but still relegate to nature, right? Or the natural functionality of the human being. These are pla'im, these are wonders. And this can give us a little bit of that confidence and that strength when a person feels abandoned and a person feels as if, where's God in my life? Like the Kotzker Rebbe said, where is God wherever you let him in? And sometimes we just need to focus on those elements of our lives in which God is already in. It's not a matter of us letting him. The very nature of our being, the very fact that we exist as human beings, we've already let him in. He's already there. And so when a person focuses on such a thing, and the next time you remember something from decades ago, and you're like, where was that? Remember, Rebbe Nachman told you this is a doorway to God. And like the pasuk says, Su'u marom einechem. Doesn't simply mean lift your eyes on high, look up, like esa einai laharim. It means deeper than that. Su'u marom einechem. Hasidic masters wanted very, very much that a Jew should live life with an elevated eyesight, not simply to be looking up, that's also true, but to live life with an elevated eyesight, to be able to look at things that another human being would look at, and it was just natural, nature, normal, nothing astounding, and to be able to utilize that as a little, shot of joy and wonder and awareness of God. That's point number one. Point number two is, like I mentioned before, Rebbe Nachman is using this as an analogy. There are things, there are memories that we're able to bring into our consciousness that exist all the time. We don't know where they are, but they're very much a part of us. They're in nobody else's brain. They're in us, but they're so deeply buried that unless something's going to trigger it or associate or enable us to retrieve it through an association, we'll never know that it's there. And Rebbe Nachman is using this as an analogy for so many other things with regard to what we're capable of on so many levels. There are parts of us that are walking with us all the time, that are part and parcel of what it is that we represent in this world. And they're not so difficult to access. Much like this, they're very easily accessible. That's point number two. I would say point number three is that it's fascinating that Rebbe Nachman is the one to speak about this kind of associative bundles of concepts and thoughts, because this is the benchmark of Rebbe Nachman's Torah, right? In Likutei Moharan, which is, like we described in the beginning of this series, is more Rebbe Nachman's classroom as opposed to the class trip where he's communicating to us, in a more sort of nonchalant, way, or in that kind of setting. But in Likutei Moharan, all of Rebbe Nachman's lessons are founded on these associative concepts, words, ideas, bundles of them, to the point that when a person remembers one element, that's able to, to introduce him to a whole new cluster of thought. And all the clusters are connected to the extent that Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter, one of the current leaders of Breslov Hasidus, Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter, says that the whole Likutei Moharan is one long story. It's one long thing. All of the different, there are 411 lessons across 2 volumes. Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter says it's all one. And when a person is able to understand, like Rabbi Nachman said, there's no one who understands one lesson if you don't know all of the lessons backward and forward. When a person understands that, then a person knows this gigantic cluster and the way in which all of the clusters associate with one another, interact with one another. And so it's pretty fascinating that Rebbe Nachman himself is describing, the nature of what his Torah is in and of itself. Okay, so that's Sichos HaRan Chaf Hey. It's a good thing to remember. Okay, so here Rebbe Nachman says like this, Sichos HaRan Chaf Vav. This is a very important teaching. Fascinatingly enough, this teaching is all about what? All about forgetfulness. The previous teaching is all about remembering. This teaching is all about forgetfulness. And this also goes very deeply into what we've said many times in the past, and the way in which Rebbe Nachman is balanced Always, 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 Rebbe Nachman strives for the balance. And whenever he speaks about one idea, he's going to bring the flip side of it, and he's going to highlight the benefits of either and both, because Rebbe Nachman is that place of emes, and emes, like we've described again many times in the past, is aleph, the first letter in the aleph base, mem, the middle letter of the aleph base, and taf, the last letter of the aleph base. It's a conjugation between chesed and gvura that results in tiferes, which is Yaakov Avinu, which is emes, and therefore it contains the whole spectrum. And a broad-minded person is able to understand, okay, there's a way in which two truths can function together. What do I need at this time, in this way, and so on and so forth. So Rebbe Nachman first speaks about the maila of memory. Now he speaks about the benefits of forgetfulness. Rebbe Nachman says like this: Eitzala olam, by the rest of the world, hashikha hichisaron gadol be'eineihem. Forgetfulness is a horrible thing in their eyes. Horrible thing to forget. But Rebbe Nachman said, in my eyes, there's an incredible benefit to this capacity to forget. Why? Because if a Jew is never able to forget anything, it would be simply impossible to move on and to accomplish anything in one's service of God and avodas Hashem. Why? Because a person would be completely debilitated, weighed down by the memories of those lesser moments, of those lapses, of those times when a person wasn't in what we call mochin de gadlus, more of an expanded consciousness, those times when a person failed, those times when a person fell. If a person would remember all of the transgressions, if a person would remember all of the rebellious acts, or not really rebellious, but this slip into a lower mode of being, a person would never be able to lift himself up with any sort of feeling of confidence to be able to accomplish anything. And beyond that, beyond avodas Hashem, all of the things in which a person may have done wrong outside the context of avodas Hashem, business deals that didn't go the way that a person expected them to, bad investments, relationship troubles, choices that a person made that adversely affected one's life, a person wouldn't be able to move on. They would confuse, they would confound the person. Everything that a person's gone through and that a person has experienced. But Rebbe Nachman says, through utilizing this capacity in a conscious way, not just that you happen to forget, to consciously forget, to utilize that capacity that we have within us to actually consciously forget something. I know it sounds like a paradox, right? But there's a way of doing this. And what it means is to move on, to simply move on. We have that capacity. We might remember it, right? Because we can't force ourselves to forget. On the contrary, the more that we try to forget something, the more we're going to remember, maybe to forget it, but it's not going to be wiped out of our memory. We're supposed to forget, we're supposed to wipe out the memory of Amalek, any further with what had already passed. The Indian Zen, says Reb Nosson, this kind of lifestyle, hu derech eitza tova gedola ma'od b'avodas Hashem. This kind of approach is going to be very, very useful and helpful in one's service of God. Because in accordance with what's naturally and normally experienced or commonly experienced, a person has so much confusion in his life. Specifically, a person stands up to daven, and specifically at that time, all of the different confusions, all the different things that a person experienced, memories, and they grab the person's mind and they lead it astray from what the person should be focusing on, which is the given moment that we're living in this moment itself. Business things, mundane obligations, paying the bills. Or a person says, oh, I didn't act properly in this and this thing, and I could have done that, and it turned out he should have done something else. More insidiously, the Yetzer Hara attacks a person at the time of learning davening with those averos that a person committed. And the Yetzer Hara comes to tell a person, who do you think you are? That you think that you're going to be able to serve God, to daven, to learn. Look at what you've done. You didn't act properly with regard to your relationship with Hashem. So much that we go through. Every person knows what that is. Al came therefore, it is a very good piece of advice to move on. And again, of course, this does not mean to preclude tshuva, which will necessitate a person to remember. Very, very specifically, vidui is not just generally. A person is supposed to be mefaret, literally get into the specifics of what I did, to talk about it from an objective standpoint, removed from that place, and then revisit the folly from a more subjectively mochen de godless perspective, to really go into it and say, oh my gosh, what a fool I was. Not simply to talk about the generality of what I did, but to go into specifics. So a person needs to have that remembrance, and perhaps that's what Rebbe Nachman made reference to as a prelude to this piece in the previous point, that don't worry, you can move on, but all of those things will be there when you need them. Maybe that's also as a way of a hakdama to this, because you're going to need to remember all of those elements. It's a very necessary part of tshuva, but not so that those details and those elements and those experiences should withhold you going forward in your avodas Hashem outside the context of the avodas Hashem that's associated with those averos, right? That's the point here. The point here again, and that's what I said, that Rebbe Nachman is both. Rebbe Nachman is everything. Rebbe Nachman is showing us the beauty of all of these different standpoints in the aspect of the maila of forgetfulness and the aspect of the maila of remembering. The question is when and in what way. And over here, Rebbe Nachman is drawing a very mighty distinction between positive memories that are necessary for tshuva, at the right time, in the right mindset, in the appropriate place, and so on and so forth, as we'll learn from the Baal Tanya Be'ezer Hashem in a moment, and between those kinds of memories that are going to cause a person to become debilitated to the point that a person is not able to move on in a healthy way. So that's what Rebbe Nosson says here based on Rebbe Nachman. Al Kain again, therefore, hashikcha hi eitza toiv gedol ma'od. It's a very, very good advice. Once something happened already, Yavir, push it out of your consciousness, push it out of your conscious thought, and move on. There's no use worrying, there's no use overthinking, as we're going to see from Reb Nosson, what Rebbe Nachman called ibertrachten, overthinking. There's no use. It's done. It's finished. There's no use worrying. There's no use. And like we always say, what's Rebbe Nachman all about? What's Breslov all about? Tachlis. What's the princess all about? Tachlis. Malchus. Tachlis. The ultimate purpose. And a person has to ask themselves all the time, what's the purpose here? Okay, granted, much of our lives are lived in a state of mochen de katnus where we're not able to, to think in that sort of way, and we act very impulsively in certain areas. But when a person is in a more broad-minded state, and a person can develop that broad-minded state so that it's more and more accessible to a person, more and more frequently, until the person is living in that way. And that's what the tzaddikim lived, in a state of mochen de gadlus all the time. They had their own mochen de katnus on their level, but by and large, they were the conscious, right? That often eludes us. When a person is in that broad-minded state, the question is, what's the tachlis of this? Is this going to bring me closer to God or away from God? Is this the Yetzer Tov, or is this the Yetzer Hara dressing up like the Yetzer Tov, much like Esav, the Saro Shel Esav? The Gemara tells us, dressed up like a Talmud Chacham when he battled Yaakov Avinu. It wasn't this fiery demon battling with a holy bearded Jew. It was two bearded Jews fighting with one another, believe it or not. And one was Yaakov Avinu, and one was Mamish, the Sichos HaRan, the Satan. And the reason Chazal tell us that is because so often those voices within that purport to speak in the name of the Yetzer Tov is actually Mamish the Satan. How do we discern? We have to ask ourselves, what's the tachlis of this? Where's this going to bring me? What's the function of this right now? Is this the right time? Is this the right place? Am I in the right state to do tshuva in a healthy way? Or is this going to drag me down and prevent me from moving forward? That's the question. Right? The line before. And Rebbe Nachman would remove his mind from this. Legamri. He wouldn't think of it klal. Rebbe Nosson says, remember this well. It's a very big thing. It's a very important thing, the Isav Svarim, and it's brought in the holy works. Listen to this. This is so beautiful and amazing. That this is why Shikha was given to Am Yisrael. It's a gift. Not just because of what we said before, but there's another benefit to forgetfulness, and that is that in a person's learning and in a person's discovering ideas in Yiddishkeit, the words of Torah that are mesameach es halev. So when a person forgets, then every time he learns something, even though he learned it 10 times already, it has the same preciousness and sweetness as if you learned it the first time. Because through forgetfulness, when a person goes back and revisits that sugya and Gemara and halacha, when a person revisits that Torah from the Tiferes Shlomo, something, a person revisits something that he learned, whatever he already learned, it's going to be as new, and it's going to give him pleasure, and it's going to be wonderful for him. V'isa mashal. And Rebbe Nachman says that it's based on Chazal. There's a medrash. Rebbe Nachman says that there's a parable for this. To a person who learns and forgets what he learns, which is of course a common experience. And people get very frustrated by this. They feel as if I'm not covering ground. I'm not making progress. Says the Heilige Rebbe that the mashal, the parable for this is Sichos HaRan chavios. A person hires people to fill barrels with water. And the barrels have holes in them. And therefore, whatever they pour into the barrels, goes outside. So the fools think to themselves, if everything's being, is pouring out of the barrels as soon as we pour them in, what's the function of us trying to fill these barrels? But the wise person says, Mali bazeh. What does it matter to me that the water is spilling out? He pays me for a day's worth of pouring water into barrels. It's not going to become lessened by this, that there's less water in the barrels than he expected. That's not part of the contract. He asked me to pour water into the barrels. Makes no difference how much water stays in the barrels. He has hired me on a contract to do this. What does it matter to me if it spills out? And of course, the nimshal for this is, and the moral of this parable or analogy is that same question of what's the point here? What's the tachlis? If the purpose is that a person should become a tremendous Talmid Chacham, and a person should be able to have all of these, incredible things that a person could remember and give over, and if that's the point, so then, yeah, it's going to be frustrating. But if the point is that Ribbon Shalom, you commanded us to learn, you gave us a Torah that's going to purify us, it's going to sanctify us by virtue of our engagement with it, irrespective of how much stays with us. And that my connection with you is not dependent on how much I retain, but it's dependent on how conscious I am of the connectivity between you and me when I am learning, when I am engaged in the pouring of water, ein mayim ala Torah. The water is, of course, a reference to Torah that is pouring through me. And that whether or not the water stays within me, it is sanctifying me as it passes through me. And I'm connecting to you. And the schar, if you want to talk about schar, which the Hasidic masters don't often talk about, but if you want to speak about that, I'm getting rewarded irrespective, again, of whether or not I remember. So says Rebbe Nachman, Kach, it's the same thing. Even though a person's forgetting schar, don't worry. The person's schar, the person's reward, but of course the reward is much deeper than what I'm getting in Olam Haba. It's the reward of an experience of God and of godliness in my life to upgrade my mode of thinking and my mode, like we spoke about before, to develop an elevated way of looking at life and the world. That's not detracted from. And he continues and he says, V'da, and a person should also know, that in the future, when a person goes up after 120, we should all live long and happy, Be'ezer Hashem, and should be Tchiyas HaMesim already. We shouldn't have that experience at all. But la'asid, at a certain point in the future, they're going to remind you of everything that you learned. Kol ma shalamad. Afim shachach, even if a person forgot it. And deeper than that, people who study the words of true tzaddikim and they don't understand the word, which is so often people, the experience of many people, not just, with regard to other tzaddikim, specifically Rabbi Nachman. When the neshama leaves the body after 120, then all of that which we found difficult or impossible to grasp will be easily accessible. The primary Torah is for the soul. And any lack of understanding comes from physicality, whatever that is, limitations of the body, limitations of cognitive capacities, and so on and so forth. But the soul on its own is an deeply understanding and wise being that emerges from God's chachma. And therefore, in the world in which the body is left behind, like we've learned in the previous pieces, and a person exists in Olam Haba as a soul on its own, everything that a person learned and forgot, or everything that a person learned and couldn't understand, will be easily understood and accessible. Everything a person learned will be reminded of in the next world. Fortunate is the one that spends their days engaged in Torah and avoda. That's a shining beacon of what it was that God had in mind when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that Jews should live with lives that are not lived behind the cages of halacha, but on the contrary, lives that are glorified, lives that are dignified, lives that are to be able to stand very, very strong and firm and proud against a culture that's very antithetical to a lot of our values, to be able to stand up and to be able to show the world how beautiful it is and how much we rejoice in every element of our respective obligations, opportunities, gifts. Ashrenu. Okay, so let's jump into these teachings over here with the last half hour or so, 20 minutes or so that we have left. So the first teaching is from Reb Nosson of Likutei Halachos. Mamish, such a beautiful, beautiful teaching. I'm so excited to learn this with you. Reb Nosson says like this. This is Likutei Halachos Hilchos Sefer Torah, Halacha Hey. And Reb Nosson says like this. This is the understanding of the Torah's end, the way in which we are Messiahing the Torah, the way in which we finish our reading of the Torah on Simchas Torah, and then the immediate commencement of the Torah, which of course these two things go back to back, Chas and Torah, to finish the Torah, Chas and Bereshis, to begin the Torah, B'chol Shana V'Shana. How do we end the Torah? How do we begin it? And he says, of course, the process begins with Rosh HaShana, which of course we're already beginning to prepare ourselves for. Rebbe Nachman's whole thing was Rosh HaShana, Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be able to reveal godliness within the world, within our lives. And then Simchas Torah is when the process culminates. Because in the weeks of Elul, of Tishrei, the beginning of Tishrei, we're learning about the end of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu was commanding in Sefer Devarim, which, by the way, corresponds to the last Hey Yud Kevavke. It's the level of Malchus, which is why it doesn't have anything new, because Malchus is like the moon; it doesn't have a light of its own, and that's why the fifth Chelek of the Torah, which is Sefer Devarim, is associated with the last Hey of Yud Kevavke. It's associated with the sphere of Malchus, and therefore is only reflective of that which is already presented in the first four books, and that's why the letters Yud Kevavke are four letters with the little thorn on top of the Yud. It's a fifth element, and so the fifth book is going to be associated with the sphere of Malchus. That's the last letter Hey of Yud Kevavke. But all of that is leading up to Simchas Torah, until we finish Kol Torah u'maschilim miyad, and again we immediately commence. Because Simchas Torah, which is the end of Sukkot, is the end of a long Kabbalistic process that begins with Rosh HaShana and then continues into the Aseret Tshuva until Yom Kippur, and then the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and then the 7 days of Sukkot, all the way until Simchas Torah Shmini Atzeres. That's the culmination of a long process. It's not separate Chagim, the high holidays. It's one holiday. It's one progression, specifically Kabbalistically, when a person person understands what Rosh HaShana is, I hope as Rosh HaShana in the years to come, we'll be able to delve into this. Reb Nosson has incredible Torahs on this. But it's all one process. So it culminates on Simchas Torah. Nigmar HaTikun, whatever Kabbalistic rectification we are engaged with that begins Rosh HaShana, ends on Simchas Torah. Shehischel Rosh HaShana, Ve'ikar HaTikun, what is the primary Tikun? Chevra, what is it? What is the rectification? We can speak Kabbalistically, but Tachlis, how does it manifest in our lives? Says Reb Nosson, very simple. Tzrichem l'salik hamochen shemikvar u'lahaschel mechadash. You know what it is? It's a rebirth. Hayom haras olam. Of course, there are particularities of, without getting into the depth of it, right? But binyan hamalchus, there's an asira that takes place where malchus is cut off from Zeir Anpin and it's made into its own parts of it. It's very complex and detailed. But at the crux of it is that each year we should be reborn. And if we're living life correctly, and all of us are, but certainly on a conscious level, if a person merits every year, we're reborn into a higher state of being, into a new element of our spiritual striving, that it's not just the same thing again and again, but every year it's something fresh. But that's the tikkun, to let go of what we were and to walk into Rosh HaShana and believe that we can become different, we can become better, we can become more connected to our source. This takes place every day on a micro level. That's why one of the reasons that's brought in the Rishonim for why we wash our hands in the morning, because we're called a Beria Chadash. Every morning we wake up, like I often say from the Zohar Kaddish, the pasuk that says Vayashkim Lavan Baboker, that Lavan woke up in the morning, but it can also mean Vayashkim Lavan Baboker. When a person wakes up in the morning, he wakes up a Lavan, he wakes up white, he wakes up clean, he wakes up refined, and that's the Inyanim Netilas Yadayim to sort of prepare or be mechanech, to initiate the beginning of a new entity, a new way of being. So that's true every day. Ki b'chol shana, right? So he says, Mikol shekim b'Rosh HaShana. Certainly that's true of every day. Imagine every year, Shutchilas HaShana, the beginning of the year. Shekol b'kashasenu, our whole tefillah on Rosh HaShana is Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova, Chadesh Aleinu. Shana Tova, help us be new. Help us be fresh. And over here, Reb Nosson says something so interesting, because usually we think about Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. What's the primary element of that bakasha? Is the Shana Tova part. That we're asking God, Ribbono Shel Olam, give me a good year. But it says Reb Nosson, no, the Shana Tova is an accessory of the Chadesh Aleinu. That's what we're asking God. Not so much, Ribbono Shel Olam, give me a good new year. No, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribbono Shel Olam, let me start fresh, and that will be a good year. But the ikar is Chadesh. Chadesh will lead to the Shana Tova. We're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give me a brand new existence. Every year is a new thing. It's a new mode of being. It's a new way of living. We're drawing on that futuristic song that is going to renew the world. Or Rebbe Nachman delineates in Torah Ches and Tinyana, the final lesson that he ever gave. We're drawing on that song that's going to renew existence. That happens every year. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly performing wonders. We spoke about God's wonders before, constantly. The ikar is chadshus nimshach min Rosh HaShana. But the primary renewal begins from Rosh HaShana, she'az mechadesh Hashana v'hachodesh biyachad. Because Rosh HaShana is the only chag where we find a new year. Well, obviously it's the beginning of the year, but it's the only chag that falls out on a Rosh Chodesh as well. And so it's the head of new. It's the new Chodesh. It's the new moon. The moon is, of course, Malchus. It's the new year. It's a fresh start. Reb Nosson says that on Rosh HaShana we're drawing down a brand new mentality, a brand new consciousness, a brand new way of thinking. Al Kol HaShana Kula for the next year, fresh. That will enable us to tap into this aspect of renewal we've spoken about in the past in this series. That's why Rosh HaShana phenomenally has 2 days, because that's the message of Rosh HaShana. What do you mean 2 days? Rosh HaShana is the beginning. How do you have 2 beginnings? But that's the point. The point is that from the energy that a person merits to bring into his or her soul on the first day of Rosh HaShana, that teaches us how to begin anew, even a second time, even 1,000 times, because that means that we brought into our hearts that energy of renewal. Umasha avar nimshach alav shikha. And Reb Nosson says that Rosh HaShana gives us the ability to draw into our hearts this holy forgetfulness consciously, to let go of those things in the past, that nothing should draw me away from God. To forget these things. That's associated with the chet ego. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I forgot that also. There's an element of forgetting. There's an element of forgetting even the root of all sin. Listen to this, it's brilliant. Do you know where shikha came into the world? Where did Chazal tell us shikha, forgetfulness, came from? It came from Moshe Rabbeinu breaking the luchas. When he came down after the Chet Egel and he saw what was going on in his fury and his anger, he threw the luchos to the ground and he shattered them and he broke them. And Chazal say, at that moment, bashikha la'olam. Before that, nobody forgot anything. I don't know what exactly that meant. I don't know, how that impacted relationships and, and other elements of life. But ultimately, that's where shikha came from. Maybe specifically the forgetfulness of Torah, I don't know. But that's where bashikha la'olam, forgetfulness, came into the world. Says Reb Nosson, Reb Nosson says, you think that was a curse? You think that this element was mamish, that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchas and that brought something into existence that is a problem? Chaver, give me 1 second because I'm getting a call and it was from a Rebbe, or I don't want to keep him waiting, but okay, I guess I'll call him back afterwards. I missed it. But so see, he says, you think it was a curse that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchas? He was so angry and forgetfulness came into the world. He says it was conscious. The breaking of the luchas and the forgetfulness that came into the world through that was itself the tikkun for the chet egel. It's amazing. It's not that Moshe Rabbeinu, out of his anger, seeing what was going on, broke the luchas, forgetfulness came into the world. It was a disaster. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, Chevra, you're going to need this. After this, you're going to need this. And he did them a favor. Listen to this. Moshe Rabbeinu did this consciously so that each and every person would be able to consciously enter this experience of Ashkiach L'Salik Midaita L'Gamri Kol Masha Avar, so that each and every individual would be able to set aside all of those things that a person was guilty of, so that a person can start fresh without being weighed down and debilitated by the past. That a person will be able to begin again. You know how we end the Torah? How do we end the Torah? With the words Le'enei Kol Yisrael. What's that a reference to? This, that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchas in front of all of Am Yisrael. What does Rashi tell us? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Yasher kochacha sheshibarta. Thank you for breaking the luchas. That's how we end the Torah, which is the culmination of the tikkun that begins on Rosh HaShana. That's all about renewal. And then, and then we start fresh with the creation, with the renewal. In the beginning, God created the world. This is the primary culmination and the pinnacle of the tshuva process that begins with Rosh Chodesh Elul, leads us through Rosh HaShana, leads us through Yom Kippur, leads us through Sukkot Tshuva Me'ava, all the way to Simchas Torah, is encapsulated within our ending the Torah with the breaking of the luchas and our immediate beginning with Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim es haaretz ki ze ikra tshuva shemamshichim b'chol shana b'Rosh HaShana v'aseres yimei tshuva l'chadesh atzmi b'chol pam, to begin fresh b'bechinas hashiveinu Hashem elechem nashuva. Right? What we just read on Eicha, that maybe the process even begins from Eicha. To begin fresh. Chadesh yamenu kekedem. Bechinas tes chadesh keneshen uroichi. Let me start again like I never started. like I never lived. Let me be reborn. V'alkein v'chol shana misaymen atayr v'chayzun amaschilin esabi itim alolam Rosh HaShana at Simchas Torah. This is the time period of tshuva, the time period of renewal. We end the Torah and we start the Torah. Ki siyim haTorah v'aschalasa ze ba'atzmo b'chinas siyim u'gemar hashana v'aschalas hashana chadasha. Our finishing, completing the Torah on Simchas Torah, and then beginning the Torah anew is itself the culmination of the process of beginning a new year and letting go of the old year. And that's this incredible interaction between the pasuk Le'eni Kol Yisrael that talks about forgetfulness, and then we move into Bereshis Bara, because Reb Nosson says the deepest thing, there is no way that you can move into a Bereshis Bara, into a Rosh HaShana, into a new year, without the element of Yasher Kochacha Sheshibarta Le'ene Kol Yisrael. Thank you for breaking the luchas. Isn't that incredible? I mean, this is just, it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful, beautiful idea. This interaction between these two psukim that are back to back, primarily and specifically at the beginning of the year, to enable us to let go of what was, Le'ene Kol Yisrael, and move into a Bereshis Bara, move into a new creation and a new beginning. Ki shalosh koimos, Rebbe Adam Atzma, he says, and therefore each person sarach lebechina zois needs to do this as well. L'sayim u'lahaschil, let go of what was and start fresh. Ta'inu l'sayim ligmor l'salek hakol masha avar lahaschil atam echadash. What was. Of course, tshuva is necessary, but in terms of how we're able to start fresh, mamish, each moment is something new. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechadesh b'tuva b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshis. Every split second, God is recreating the world. It's fresh. Let go of it. Don't let the past hold you down. You're not chained to it. It's a dimayon. It's not the words of the Yetzer Tov. It's the words of the Yetzer Hara. Let go of it. And every person needs to do this. Ta'inu l'sayim b'ligmar u'l'salek hakol, to complete that element, to move on. Lahaskalat echadash. Ki shalosh Kaima is because there are three different parallel universes within existence. Olam, Shana, Nefesh, we speak about this often as well. There's the aspect of space, which is Olam. There's the aspect of Shana, which is time. There's the aspect of Nefesh, of the human ego, of our own experience in this world. And all of these are bound up one with the other. And all of these draw on the Torah. Now that's the essence of existence, that the world was created with the Torah. That means time was created with the Torah, space was created with the Torah, and the human identity was created with the Torah, each of whom are a letter in the Torah. So everything is going to be bound up with what we're doing with the Torah. And therefore, everything is renewed. Listen to this. Everything is renewed. So this is encapsulated within the finishing and completing of the Torah, with Le'ene Kol Yisrael Shikha, to let go and forget consciously. Haschalas, and to begin Bereshis Barish is the Ikar Tikun Mekanal. That's the primary tshuva. That's the primary rectification of the Yamim Noraim and Sukkos. V'zeu b'chinas luchus v'shivri luchus menachem ba'aron. He says, you know what the Aron contained? It couldn't just contain the whole luchus. It had to contain both. Because klal barzel yesh echad, there's one iron rule. You cannot have the luchas without shivri luchas. You cannot have an experience of the holistic, full, complete, shining element of mochen de gadlus without consciously experiencing the shikha that comes as a result of the shivri luchas. These two were put together. These two were in the aron together. The complete luchas are the aspect of remembering. You have to remember the Torah. The Torah is passed on ish bi-ish. It's very important. Not one letter is different in a Sefer Torah. It's been for thousands of years to remember. That's the luchas. The shivri luchas and mechinas shikha. A Jew has to know when to remember. A Jew has to know when to forget. And both are put in the holiest item, in the holiest object in existence, in the holiest place. Because it's going to be impossible to remember the Torah in the sense of being able to live it for in a perpetual sense, to be able to give it on to the next generation, and so on and so forth, in whatever capacity. Only way to do that is if you're going to know the secret of the Shivrei Luchas, if you're going to know the secret of how to actually go ahead and experience this forgetfulness. Not to allow the memory which we need in a holy sense, that's what Reb Nosson hints to over here, both with regard to Torah study. Of course, a person should try to remember, and of course, that's the ikar. Reb Nosson makes that clear in other places. The point is not, like the mashal before, just pour in all the water and don't even make any attempt at remembering. Of course, we should try to remember what we can. Goes without saying. But in this natural experience of forgetfulness and in the capacity to consciously forget where it's going to aid our forward-moving progress, we need this aspect of shikha. A person has to always balance the two. Everything's a balance. In Breslov, everything's a balance, a tension. Like a person needs to remember everything. Forgetfulness also has its place. There are many things that a person needs to consciously move on from. So they should not hold us back. That's the Indian of Rosh HaShana that culminates in Simchas Torah, the reading of Le'ein Kol Yisrael, to finish the Torah, the siyum, the shikha that comes from Shivrei Luchas, forget that element, and then move on to the renewal of Bereshis Bara Elokim, which is, of course, again, the culmination of the beginning of the year and the beginning of our new mode of existence for a new year. I don't think we're going to have time to finish the rest of the sources. I guess we'll start next week's shiur with the Tanya. But let's see Rebbe Nosson over here for the last 5 minutes that we have left. In Olam L'Trufa, these are letters that Rebbe Nosson wrote to his son primarily. There are other letters in there as well, but primarily to his son Rav Yitzchak, with whom he was extremely, extremely close. And Rebbe Nosson says like this: Basi la'arercha al ma sha'ata ragil lichte b'chol pam. I came to talk to you about this that you always write to me, because you're always thinking, you're always contemplating every single aspect and element of your life with calculations and sophisticated thinking. And that causes you many problems and many confusions because you're so busy thinking and considering and over-considering and overthinking. Says the Eiliger of Nosson, I came to tell you, because this itself is a question on you. Who asked you to feel the need always to overthink? Adarabba. Adeinu Moreno Rabbeinu Zal, Rebbe Nachman his Hiranu Harbe warned us very much, Livli Lachshov Harbe, not to overthink. But Amr Beferish, and he said very clearly, this thing that people feel the need to just spend so much time thinking and overthinking, even with regard to things that passed and things that were done, mistakes that were made, or situations that are finished, to overthink. And that casts a person into a negative place. Says Reb Nosson, if you already became accustomed to this kind of living, in this mode of being, he says, you're dealing with a problem which is itself only a symptom of a deeper problem, and you can go to the core and just try to develop this kind of living, which Rabbi Nachman in another place associates with erech hapayim, with patience, and not with this very intense way of needing to consider every single angle, every single thing, to overthink, specifically with regard to things of the past. To break this, so this move away your mind from it. You made a decision, go with it. Don't be thinking 1,000 times, did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? What would have been if I would have? Leave it. It's not going to help you. We don't live life backward. We live life forward thinking, forward moving. Let go. And negative thoughts, for sure, a person needs to escape them. And this doesn't just mean impure thoughts, but this is also going to mean, 2 for the price of 1 over there. Give up. So he says, it is not just negative thoughts, but he says even it's mamish thoughts of anxiety or thoughts of negative, self-loathing and things like this. Move on. Put those aside. It's mamish the satan. you're not essentially a person that lacks the capacity to go ahead and to have confidence, to go ahead and to move forward. On the contrary, like we learned previously in the piece from Chav Hey, there are so many capabilities that we have as human beings that are mamish already a part of us, despite the fact that we've never met them. And with very, very delicate tools that are given to us, with ease, we're able to tap into those elements, rewire our way of thinking, reframe certain elements, train ourselves to think in a different way, primarily by reshifting our goals and our ideals and understanding what life is about, what the ideal Jew looks like, what Avodas Hashem is for, what it means to be a good Jew, what it means, and so on and so forth. And that will enable us to go ahead and succeed in all of these areas, to tap into those latent potential parts of ourselves that are very, very holy and that are very strong and filled with whatever tools we need to achieve our potential. Simply to forget whatever we have gone through. And to believe in the Sichos of Rabbi Nachman, with whom we are privileged to have a connection, that everything will turn around for the good. There's no use worrying. There's no use overthinking. Leave it. Whatever was in the past was in the past. Focus on the future. Focus on the next step. Focus on renewal. Every day is fresh. Every year is fresh. Every moment, we're brand new. Hamachadish betuva, like we said, b'chol yom tamid, not just every day, tamid, every split second. Rak chazak v'yamatz, encourage yourself, take strength, and utilize this capacity of holy forgetfulness that Moshe Rabbeinu knew that after the Chet Egel, Am Yisrael needed this as their antidote. Am Yisrael needed the ability to forget in a way of conscious letting go and moving on, not to let this drag me down. I need to do tshuva, I'll do tshuva. I'll remember those elements for the sake of vidui. But the very next moment to go ahead and to serve God, like one of the tzaddikim said, I think it was Pinchas Karitzer, that any Jew that cannot perform the worst aveir in the world, or Rahman al-Islam, a Jew who has performed or slips into the worst thing and can't daven a mincha 5 minutes later filled with passion, has not stepped on the threshold of Chassidus. That's Reb Pinchas Karitzer. I believe it was Reb Pinchas Karitzer said. And that's a very powerful statement. And that's really what this whole thing is about. That's what Hasidus is. Every moment is fresh. We are not our actions. We are not shamed by our behaviors. We are deeper than that. We are essentially holy. We are essentially good. We want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a state of normalcy and sanity. We fall into certain pockets of insanity, what Chazal refer to as the Ruach Shtus, the spirit of folly. But essentially, our mincha 5 minutes later stands independent and irrespective of anything that we did 5 minutes early. Of course, a person has to be on guard, and with this will finish. A person has to be on guard to make sure that these ideas are taken to the negative extreme, to the point in which a person can do whatever he wants, and then simply to, set it aside and then serve God and then, accommodate all of those elements of mochen dekatnos. Of course, that's true. And that's true of any chizuk, whether it be from Rebbe Nachman, whether it be from any of the tzaddikim, whether it be from Chazal. The Chazal gave incredibly encouraging statements. The purpose is, of course, again, not to try to school a system, not to try to corrupt or to try to take advantage of certain ideas and fool God and fool ourselves. We want to be good. We want to do the right thing. We want to access tools that are going to help us grow closer to our HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in a way of health, balance, broad-mindedness, nuanced thinking, and the ability to weigh, like Reb Nosson says, different elements, to know what I need at different times to bring me closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These are some very, very important tools. Siyata D'Shmai, we should be able to make use of them and to indeed start fresh every day, every moment, let go of what was. It's not shading you down. And mamish, to engage in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love through his mitzvos, through his Torah, every split second of every day, irrespective of what the past held. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, I think we accomplished a lot. We still have these beautiful teachings from the Tanya, a Medrash, Koheles, and a very important teaching from the Shevet Musar, which we will begin with Be'ezer Hashem next week as we move into the next piece from Rebbe Nachman and Sichos HaRan. Okay, so for now, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining, for learning. Like I always say, there's a special divine flow of blessing that comes down specifically in proportion to those souls that are part of the learning. And so it's really all of you, it's all of us. Ashreinu, what a privilege to learn these things together, and looking forward to continuing next week with Siyata Shmaya. Okay, so good to see you guys. Hope you're having the most amazing summer. Thank you so much, Rebbe.
Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to seeing you back in Yerushalayim, Hashem, all of you. Okay, we'll be in touch, Chaver. Thank you so much.